You're listening to Off the Court, a show dedicated to making you the best version of yourself as an athlete and as a person. I'm Coach Jack, CEO and owner of Close the Gate Hoops. If you want to take your life and game to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's get it. Welcome back, CTG friends. Today we got episode 2, the fastest way to grow in anything. Today, my guest, one of my great buddies, Erin, who actually is probably going to be a future CTG coach for us in our 3v3 league this summer.
Hello, everybody. My name is Erin. I've been friends with Jack since we were about 10 years old. I'm currently enrolled at Youre here in Janesville. I stayed home this year because of COVID, and I previously attended UW lacrosse. So, Jack, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So a recap of our last episode, it was a huge success, over 150 downloads. And I was actually surprised we didn't get a lot of critique, but me and Sam were FaceTiming the other day as we were going through the CTG podcast timeline, and Sam came up with a great idea. So you guys have now been crowned as the gatekeepers. So when I talk to you, I'll be like, what up, my gatekeepers? So this goes back to what does close the gate even mean, and I haven't even explained this yet. It's a defensive terminology as if court is our house. And the paint, the outside of the paint, there's fences around the outside line of the paint, okay? And obviously, to get inside through a fence, there's a gate. And the goal on defense is to close the gate, all right? We don't want to let people else get by us. We don't want them to open our gate. So Sam came up with a great idea, is that you guys are going to be called gatekeepers. So it's a name that I can call you guys, and it's directly correlated with what close the gate actually means. And in terms of the animal name, I love that idea. And one of my students, Mitchell Coombs, said he wants us to be called the Fishies. And I asked him why, and he said he had no idea. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's a good one. I like the Fishies.
Also, if anyone else wants to tag along for this journey, don't hesitate to reach out. Erin, you were one of the first ones right away that said you wanted to be on, and I thought that was awesome. If any of you guys want to be a guest or help with anything in terms of YouTube contact or any way you want to join, I'd be happy to have you join. One thing I wanted to talk about too before we get in the meat and potatoes, Erin, I have currently been working on over the last month an online program to sell to the global audience, not just Janesville, Wisconsin, but I have to start somewhere. So I'm letting you guys know right now I am starting an online program called How to Fix Your Shot Mentally and Physically for coaches and players. We all know that probably the most important attribute in today's day and age is being able to shoot the ball, because if you can't shoot, you're going to have a lot of problems in terms of your other attributes, because everything goes back to the defense guarding you closely, which opens up so many other opportunities. But this program will consist of the knowledge needed to know about your shot. So that's like innovative terminology, and then the drills needed to implement those terminology into muscle memory. We would then add the mindset, which I think is the most important part, because you could have the best athlete in the world, the best skilled player in the world, the best work ethic in the world, but if they don't have the right mindset, everything comes tumbling down. So I like saying the mindset is the base of our house. I'm sure none of you have, but if you ever do build something like a house or a shed, the foundation has to be perfect or everything else is a lot worse, and that's what the mindset is. So I just want you guys to be ready for that. The launch will happen soon. So, Erin, thank you for being on our show. Let me give a good introduction to her, Erin. This guy is an insanely gifted athlete. He did 3 sports through whole high school career, yep. He played cross country, basketball, and track, and he was most of the time the best player on their team each time he did that. But I wanted to talk to you, Erin. What was your biggest takeaway from when you were on your running teams between cross country and track, and then your biggest takeaway from basketball in terms of how they coexisted now and are leading up to your life today?
In basketball, I think that my biggest takeaway was definitely like the social aspect of it, and growing up with all of my teammates since we were in like 4th grade. It was about a community. We were kind of a community that grew up together. Mm-hmm. And it definitely helped me with my ability to communicate effectively and to work on conflict with each other, you know, and because that stuff can translate other aspects in your life, like in your family. You know, if your family's having a conflict, you learn how to deal with that kind of stuff from being on a team. And
what was that thing you told me me the other day you were at Draft House, and what happened? You were holding a tabletop.
I when I spilled the tray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I
that.
mean, it's like I was able to kind of communicate with them and just be like, I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do? And they were super cool about it. It helped that I was able to communicate with them and like tell them I'm sorry and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the communication, working together, just that kind of team aspect. And then running side of my sports career, I definitely think that was more, I was more on my own in that stage, I guess. So it was more about like just being able to get my mind to focus and be determined and work hard without having that kind of accountability from teammates. So I was like, it was basically like my own mind game, just being able to, get up for those 6 a.m. workouts or do 10 out of 10 reps instead of doing 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So what was your 800 time your senior year?
It was a 155.
Okay, and that was what, second in state?
Yep, I got second at the state meet.
Okay, so I didn't have his exact statistics, but he's a really good runner, you guys. I want you to know that. So what is the fastest way to grow? And this is a question I've been giving my students for a few months now in their notebooks, and they'd come back with answers. And the question was, what is the fastest way to grow in not only basketball, but life as well? And the words I gave them were being blank. And the blank was 13 letters. And this was actually a really tough one for not only students, but students, if they can't get it, they'll get help from their parents. And the parents couldn't even really get this one either. But the answer is being uncomfortable. A great example of this is I used to hate speaking in front of others. I remember one time when I went to St. John Vianney Elementary School, and we used to do these speech contests. I never got bad grades. Like I'm a perfectionist in that way. I couldn't get less than an A when I was at SJV, but I purposely failed the speech contest so I wouldn't have to speak in front of people. And that's an example. I shied away from being uncomfortable. But now, since the more and more I've gotten to talk to people and I've been in that uncomfortable situation, it's literally my job to talk to kids and talk to parents.
That's funny because the reason I picked up the job at Draft House as a server was because I wanted to also become more comfortable like speaking to people like that and just being able to communicate with people. I had to kind of make myself be uncomfortable in that setting so I could, really be able to like communicate effectively and things like that.
And like what we're doing right now, talking on this podcast, it's just me, Erin, and 2 microphones. It's way harder than it looks. The first time I did it with Sam last week, I was literally sweating through my shirt. I was so nervous for no reason. But this gets into what I'm about to talk about here, and that's always start before you're ready. You got to throw yourselves into things when you know you're not ready, because you're never going to be ready unless you start to do it. This is one of the best things I've started implementing into my life, but mainly the business aspect portion of Close the Gate. I have no idea what I'm doing right now, like this podcast, but I threw myself into it because I wanted to start it and influence and impact more people. And like other examples are how to make YouTube content. I had no idea how to do that, but I just had to throw myself into it and do it. Along the way, I've learned now how to talk in front of a camera, talk in front of a microphone better, but by no means am I perfect. But by throwing myself into things and whatever you're doing in life, I can grow quicker because of it, by just starting before I'm ready. And this is the same concept as your greatest teacher is always going to be your experience. That's what you're going to learn from the most, and that's how you're going to grow fastest, is from what you experience. And by throwing yourselves into things before you're ready, you're going to learn much quicker. And I got this. My mom sent me a time hop. She always is sending me time hop videos. But the other day, it was me driving in a blizzard when I was 15 and a half years old. And this was the first day I got my temps of driving. So I've never driven a car before. And the caption of the video, you've got to learn at some point. And that's what my dad said. And I had my whole family in the car for the first time, driving through a blizzard. But my dad applied this attitude too in his life. You've got to learn at some point. You got to experience it at some point. You just got to start before you're ready.
Yeah, that reminds me, it's just as simple as when I was learning to drive the moped. When I went to pick up my moped, when I first got it, it was pouring rain. I didn't know it was going to pour, but once I got there, it just started pouring. So I had to drive all the way home in the pouring rain. I had to deal with, I was slippery, turning corners and stuff stuff.
gosh.
So just things like even simply just learning how to ride a moped, you know, it applies to a lot more things than people think.
What I urge you guys to do by knowing this is chase the feeling of uncomfortability. And this gets into a concept called letting your brain self-organize. And this is basically when your brain learns and adapts without you even knowing or thinking about it. Because a lot of times I bet you didn't consciously try to talk to people because you were uncomfortable. But over time, the more and more you did that, you started to get more comfortable with people without thinking. Your brain was self-organizing every single time you were uncomfortable. And slowly over time, your brain would say things without you even knowing, like, oh, this isn't so bad. Oh, I could do this again. This is easy. You know what I mean? That's how we start the adaptation of being comfortable with something. And the more we adapt, the faster we grow. Okay, and we can't adapt unless we're uncomfortable in the first place. So I encourage you guys to chase and then stay outside the comfort zone always. This will then lead you to reaching your full growth potential. I say full growth potential a lot because, like, if there was a bar of potential of you being your best self, if you're outside your comfort zone the entire time, you'll have the chance to fill that bar to the top. And if you haven't followed our Twitter, I strongly encourage you to do so. We post motivational quotes on there every single day, and a couple of them that I did this week were directly related to this podcast topic, but one of them was, you have to do the things that you can't do. And that's kind of a weird sentence, and if you repeat that to yourself, you have to do the things that you can't do. Okay, and this is directly correlated with being uncomfortable with something. You have to do the things that you've never done before. And the number one quote said by the average person is, I've never done that before. Have you ever been, say, invited to something? Like a couple times I remember getting invited to a concert. My first response was, I've never done that before. And there's things of that nature and more examples in our life, but this is the exact attitude that's never going to get you to grow, okay? You have to do the things that you've never done before to get to that point to grow faster. Lastly, how this being uncomfortable translates to training, it's called stimulated reps. There's a lot of research on the right rep ranges for, say, lifting or basketball reps, but the more and more research I've done, it's all about stimulated reps, okay? And stimulated reps equals the most uncomfortable reps. So you could have someone doing curls for 20 reps with lighter weight, but those last 5 are super stimulated. It's going to be the same and similar type of growth when someone does heavy weight, 5 of those reps, because those reps are stimulated right away. So if you're ever training, think stimulated reps in your brain, which means uncomfortable, because those are going to be the highest growth exercises. So what does uncomfortable mean to you, Erin?
I believe that if you want to truly achieve some kind of goal, or if you have some kind of goal set and you're working towards it, it almost always requires an uncomfortable transformation or for some kind of meaningful growth. There's a MLK quote that I wrote down that I thought fit in perfectly with this topic. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And I think it's basically saying, if you're just gonna take the easy road, possible you can do that. You can just do what makes you comfortable, but that's not gonna help you grow. You're not gonna move anywhere if you keep doing that. When you put yourself outside of that and put yourself outside of the comfort zone, you're able to grow more and you're able to experience things that you've never experienced. I think that's really important. An example that I think of is when me and Jack, when we were our senior year of high school, we used to go to these swim workouts that were required for cross country. So I had to go, but Jack would just show up on his own because I think it made him uncomfortable. So he felt like he wanted to go do that, you know. And they were intense swim workouts. They're pretty heavy on the lung. I think it was very beneficial to both of us.
The weirdest part about those swim workouts, your body's like a thermal warm feeling as you're swimming because you're sweating, but it's in the pool. It's the weirdest feeling you've ever experienced. Okay.
It is. The worst part wasn't even the workout. I think the worst part was waking up at 5:30 in the morning and then getting in the freezing cold pool or whatever.
That was terrible. Jumping in.
Yeah. It made us uncomfortable, you know. So I think it didn't even just help us with our health. It helped us we learned about like accountability and things like that through that. So I think that was really important. Another thing I wanted to talk about was a lot of people nowadays are using things like social media and video games to kind of escape an uncomfortable reality. You have homework sitting next to you and then your video games sitting next to you. A lot of people now are choosing the video games now and then doing the homework later.
And in terms of like friends too, you'll have people, I've hear stories of my kids talking all the time, and they'll be like, yeah, this one kid in our class, I don't think he goes outside because he's stuck on his video games. Like, these kids would rather play video games or be on their phone than hang out with real people, which is actually a really big problem.
Yeah, and it makes me think of all the things that we used to do when we were kids, you know, that we would just like go do random things. We would explore places. Like, it taught us a lot of lessons, and we got in some trouble, and we learned from that, you know. But I think that social media it has its benefits. It's definitely a distraction from some things that might be a little bit more important.
For sure.
We need some types of instant gratification in our lives, you know, to keep us sane, right? We can't just be working hard 24/7, you know. We need some breaks. We need some small wins for ourselves.
Enjoyment, right? You got to enjoy your life while it's going on, the process.
The bigger picture wins are what really matter. You know, when you really work hard for something, when you really work hard towards a goal and you finally get that goal, those are unbeatable. You can't replace those with things like video games. If you look at examples of like some of the athletes that have gone through some crazy things, one person that I really admire is Jimmy Butler. We saw him play in the NBA Finals this year, you know, and he plays with a certain type of grit and just, he's a big dog, you know, that's his mentality. And if you've heard his story, he was homeless when I think he was like 12 when he got like kicked out of his house. And I read this story that he like faxed his college essay to Marquette from McDonald's.
Really?
Yeah, and I just thought that was so like just how he had to like fight for himself for that long. And now we see that mentality is embodied in his play in the NBA. Sure. So I mean, you can tell that Jimmy Butler went through a lot of uncomfortable things and a lot of uncomfortable transformations when he was growing up. And now you can just see how he handles adversity and how he is able to just fight through anything in the NBA too.
No, that's a great example. He's a dog. He's always fighting on the court.
He's fun to watch. He's one of my favorite players just because he's just always playing hard. And change is like one of the only constant things in the world. You have to learn to accept it. It's going to happen. And when people start to accept change, that's when they can really start living more peacefully, I guess, you know, living calmer. Just you have to become adaptable. Criticism goes along with that as well, with change. When criticism and change can be uncomfortable things, right? So
For sure.
When we learn to like deal with these, when we learn how to deal with these, that's how we're really going to be able to change and better ourselves. You know, Jack, you ask people for criticism on your podcast because you want to know how to better yourself. You know, it may be uncomfortable hearing like negative things towards it, but when you hear it and you're able to change from that and you're able to grow from that, you know, it can be a really helpful thing and you make your podcast way better, right?
That's a really good point.
A couple things that I myself try to do, and I know Jack does some of these as well, to deal with things like stress and being uncomfortable. So one thing that I always try to do is I reframe my thoughts. I try to take away negative things out of them instead of saying like, I have to do this homework and I don't want to do it. You have an opportunity to learn something so you're able to do better on your tests and get better grades. Things like that.
So this is we'll do a whole separate podcast on this, what I'm about to say right now, but that gets directly into Erin. But I talk to my kids about this constantly, and it's perception is reality. So a lot of kids, when they're I always do really hard drills because this way I know they're going to grow faster if they do the really ones that they're really bad at. But a lot of times when they do this, they're like, how is this possible? I can't do this, and things of that nature. And the reflex of like, how do I do this? That's coming from a negative rhetoric, meaning our thoughts, okay? And if perception is reality, okay, and our perception is, how do we do this? Is this even possible? I can't do this. Then our reality is, we're not going to be able to do it. We're never going to be able to figure it out. Negative thoughts equal negative reality. And I thought that was a really good point by you, Erin.
Going along with that, I think a lot of people lose focus or lose sight that you control your own mind. You know, you're not fighting against your mind. Your mind is part of you. You are able to like control what you think. When you do that, you're able to do a lot more than your body thinks you can.
That was really good.
One of my coaches that I had in high school, Brandon Miles, he always would preach that your body can do so much more than your mind thinks, but your mind stops you before you're able to reach that limit. So it's not like, you know, if you're thinking about stopping or quitting, like 2 more reps, what's 2 more reps? You can do 2 more reps. Your mind is becoming weak and it doesn't think you can, but your body is obviously capable of doing 2 more.
Do you know that story of that guy that like fell off a cliff and broke his legs, and he'd draw a line to where he had to get to each time to like crawl to that spot. Have you ever heard this?
You know what? I feel like I
We
have,
got to
but I
figure
just
out
can't.
his name, but he would draw this line. His whole lower part of his body was broken. He fell off this cliff, and to get to safety and to the city where people could save him, he would draw this line on the ground that he could crawl to, and then he'd draw another line and he'd crawl to. And it was some staggering stat of miles that this dude crawled to survive. But that's a great example of you can go so much farther than you actually think you can.
Yeah. Well, when I was in high school and I was like running in my races, you feel yourself tighten up with like 300 meters to go in the 800. You know, you feel like you're like, if I gave up right now, I'd still be dead. But those last 300 are like so important, and you just, something switches in your mind and you're like, all I have is 300 to go, and then you just have to leave every single thing you have left out there.
And even the times when we do think we left every single thing out there, there's just a little bit more we probably could have done.
Oh yeah, and I think there's always going to be a little bit more than you could have done, even when you finish. When you see that light at the end of the tunnel, it almost makes you weaker, because you're like, okay, it's right there, I'm close enough. In reality, when you make a habit of that, of just being close enough instead of there, it turns into that's how you'll finish every single time. You want to be able to do 10 out of 10 reps instead of 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 is close, but it's not there.
Yeah, because all those shortcuts you would be taking, those would stack up over time. So in terms of how I handle stress, you guys, and when I am in uncomfortable situations, I always go back to a quote that my dad always said. It was, whatever I can't control, I turn over to God. And if you truly implement this quote, it's a simple sentence, but if you truly implemented this, life becomes really simple. And a real life example, and again, I'm stretching outside my comfort zone right now by saying this, is I'll always stress about not finding the right person to marry one day. It's a super weird, stressing and nervous thing to think about, but I was so blessed with such a good family growing up that I just want the same for my kids. And I stress that if I don't find that right person, it's not going to happen. But in reality, this is such a foolish thing to stress and be nervous about, because I cannot control what the future holds, okay? Only God can control what the future holds. So whenever I get in this form of thinking and being nervous about that, I'll just hand it over to God, and I'll say to myself, all right, everything happens for a reason. Whatever happens, it's going to work out for the better. And if you do this, life becomes so simple, and you actually have time to enjoy it. Most people get to the end of their life and they're like, wow, I didn't sit back and enjoy it. I was always worrying about the wrong things. Just always focus on worrying about the things that you can control and not the things that you can't. And an example of this would be like, my coach doesn't like me. Is the stock market going to crash? What if I can't have kids one day? And this is one I have all the time, because if I couldn't have kids one day, that would devastate me. But again, everything happens for a reason, and I can't control that. But those are just some examples of things I think people stress about normally that they have no effect on, that they could just not think about, and their life would be so much better.
That quote from your dad is probably my favorite quote that I've heard from him. I really try to apply that to my own life. Stress, it's inevitable. You know, people become stressed out about everything, especially, you know, in today's world, there's so much uncertainty and all that. It's easy to become stressed out about things, but it's basically all about how you accept it and how you kind of deal with it. You're going to run from it. It's not going to help you. That's going to create more stress for you in the long run. You got to be able to control what you can control. And then the things you can't control, you know, turn over to God. An example for me is I have no clue what I want to do after school, and I worry about it a lot. I go over different things, you know, that I want to do, and then I find something I don't like about it, and then I'm on to the next thing. But rather than, you know, sitting around thinking like, oh, I'm never going to be able to find something that I want to do, I have to go on living my life. I think that eventually I'm going to come across something that I'm going to be really passionate about. You can't just sit around waiting for the answers to come to you. I think causes a lot of people stress is people try to do everything they can for other people, things like that. Sometimes you have to be able to put yourself first. Sometimes it is okay to say no. If someone asks you to hang out and you need to get stuff done, you're not at their expense. You have to be able to say no and get your own stuff done, right? There's also, you may want to go hang out with them, but you need to consciously know that this stuff needs to come first, and then you can go hang out with your friend. I try to ahead of it as much as I can. There's ways to avoid stress. If you're putting things off, like we talked about, that's gonna cause you more stress in the future. And then the last thing that I have, you really need to truly be grateful for everything you have in life. You know, homework may be boring sometimes, but you have to be grateful that you have an opportunity to do better on tests. Doing sprints at practice, they may suck. You may be really tired and you may be mad at your coach. You have to look at it as an opportunity to get ahead of your opponent. You know, your coach isn't doing this because he's mad at you. Your coach is only doing this to try to make you better. So all in all, rather than looking at things as requirements, really you should look at them as opportunities. Regrets is pointless. If you could go back in time, I'm sure you would change some things. If I could go back in time, I would change some things. But you can't go back in time. There's nothing you can do about it, so there's absolutely no point in worrying about it. All you can really do is learn from it.
Yeah, you literally can't control the past. There's no way you can do that. One thing I forgot to mention too, if you don't believe in God or a higher sense of being, what benefit do you have by not believing that everything happens for a reason? Life is going to be much harder for you if you don't believe that. If you're stressing about things that you think you should control when you really can't, if you don't just let these things happen and understand that they do happen for a reason, you're not going to benefit from that in your life. So in reality, why wouldn't you just try to truly believe that? What I talked about earlier, opening up to you guys about my personal thoughts, like who I'm going to marry one day, or Aaron's personal thoughts of his fear of not knowing what he's going to do one day for his career. A lot of judgment can come with this. It may be uncomfortable for us to talk about, but we both know that we want to grow fast. And to do this, we have to have no fear and just don't hold back from who we truly are. Just from this little sitting today, this hour recording of a podcast, me and Erin are both growing from this tremendously. You want to get in the speed round, Erin?
Let's do it.
I don't have my phone right now. We'll just count to 10 seconds in my head. If you could make a large animal small, what would it be?
I heard this one in the last podcast. I was thinking about it in my own head. I would say a bear, because I think they would be really cute if they were just smaller, you
That's
know, and
true.
they couldn't kill you.
That's really good. A shout out to my Coombs family again. Apparently they loved when I said whale. Apparently they thought that was really funny. I'll give you a little extra time for this, but I'm stealing a lot of Sam's question from the last one. But what's the best piece of advice someone has ever given you?
Well, I mean, that quote from your dad, it really sticks with me. The control what you can control, you know, because I've always had a lot of stress in my life, and a lot of it was unneeded. So I could say that, but, you know, we already talked about that, so I'm trying to think of another one.
That's good. You got time.
Yeah, one thing my grandpa, that may not have directly given me this advice, but he lived life with a smile on his face, you know, he's just always happy. It may be difficult to do that, but having a positive mindset is just probably one of the most important things you can do.
That goes right back to perception is reality. Positive thoughts equals positive reality. Last question I got for you. Who's your top 5 basketball players all time?
Top 5 all time? I'm not going to do the list that people get mad at me for. I'm going to say LeBron is the best player of all time. Michael Jordan is second. Kareem is third. I think all those 3 could be interchangeable.
I agree.
But then I'm going to go with Magic and Bird.
I just want to set this straight right now. Sam and Erin both had LeBron at number 1. I'm definitely MJ over LeBron. I just wanted to make that clear.
I do think LeBron's better. I think that Kareem, MJ, and LeBron are all very hard to compare, and I think they could be interchangeable.
That's good. That's a good top 5.
My questions that I have for you: what is your favorite Wisconsin sports moment that you lived through? Packers, Badgers, or Bucks?
That is really hard. Okay.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. If I couldn't pick when the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2011, I remember jumping up and down on my couch like it was vividly, like it was yesterday. If I didn't pick that one, it'd have to be when we were in Sam Smith's basement and Aaron Rodgers, he was running to the left and he threw that dart to Dalvin Cook, like right on the sideline, like in the bread basket.
You said Dalvin Cook.
Maybe it wasn't
Jared
Cook.
Cook.
Jared Cook,
Yeah,
is that it?
Yeah, Dalvin
Cook,
Vikings
yeah.
running back.
I don't know why I said that. Okay, not Dalvin Cook, Jared Cook. But it was just an incredible catch. And I think it was like tied, right? And Rodgers was given like 30 seconds left to score. And then we were all like sitting, I remember we were sitting behind the couch nervous to look at the field goal. And when Mason Crosby made that field goal, we all just started freaking out.
Crazy.
That was awesome.
So if you could sit down and have dinner with 2 people, any 2 people from any time period, they could be dead or alive, who would you sit down with?
Wow.
You can have more time, too. This is a tough one, too.
Oh, my gosh.
I tried to challenge you a little bit, making you uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're doing a good job of that. So 2 people?
Yep.
Okay, one of them I'll get out of the way. I would sit down with my dad again. There's a million things I could ask him that I would ask him again. Other person. Man. Do you even know your 2 people?
No.
I totally couldn't come up with my definite top two, but I just watched a recent Netflix show on an interview between Dave Letterman and Obama, and I want to know how Obama became such a good speaker. And so if I wanted to talk to someone, I would want to ask Obama how he became such a good speaker so I could have that trait.
That'd be a good one.
That's what I would ask him.
Is there a single athlete that you find the most influential that you maybe like mirror them or like model your game after them, or you think that they have a really cool philosophy or of that, something of that sort? Do you have an athlete that you think of like that?
So currently, in terms of influential, I think MJ influenced the game more than anyone ever in any sport. In terms of right now, someone I model my game after would definitely be Damian Lillard. Just in the way he plays, I play very similar to him. But one thing that I love about Damian Lillard is he rewards loyalty. I think that's such a huge thing for everyone to do. And if you're running a business, always just remember to reward loyalty. That's something my dad always told me, and that's what I'm doing now with Close the Gate. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, Erin. And if someone really was intrigued by what you were teaching and what you were talking about, do you want to let them know how they can reach you through your Instagram or something? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could DM me on Instagram if you want. It's just Erin Leverson, Leverson. If you would rather just text me, 608-381-4675. Anything you guys need some advice or anything like that, I'm happy to help.
Erin's got a girlfriend, though, not like Sam, so do not hit Erin's number up, ladies. Thank you.
Yes, please leave me alone.
Thank you, gatekeepers, for listening to this podcast. We love it if you let us know how you liked us. Give us a rate on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever you're listening to this on. This will allow us to reach a wider audience and impact more lives. If you have ever been a part of Close the Gate or have been following us along this journey, we would love it if you could also submit some testimonials. They can be video or text. This will help others see how much true change Close the Gate can make in a life. We love as many questions as possible for new topics, and of course, always, we want critique. Always strive for better. You are never too good at something. If you'd like to reach out with us for questions, you can follow all our social media pages at CTG Hoops, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, subscribe to our podcast. And all of these things, you guys, our podcast will be posted every single Sunday. There will be a new episode. YouTube, there's content posted multiple times a week, and on our social media, we post multiple times a day, every day. You can reach out to us either at jackhummel@gmail.com or text 608-201-7384. Thank you guys so much. I'm Coach Jack. We out, baby. Peace.